you and Secretary Clinton worked really hard on the midterms. Did you think these Senate races would be closer?
I did, yeah. I did. If you look at the exit polls, you can see what happened. In the South and in West Virginia and Kentucky, let's say the sort of the toughest terrain for us, the exit polls were on point in the three least Confederate of the southern states. Like the Florida exit poll said that thanks to a $10 or $11 million expenditure in the last week, an extra one, Governor Scott would beat Governor Crist by a point. He won by less than a point. The exit polls predicted Kay Hagan would lose by 2 points, in spite of the fact that she led in the polls virtually the whole way. The undecided flipped at the end. Apparently some of it was Ebola, which was crazy. It's almost certainly determined the Maine governor's race. The exit polls predicted correctly that Mark Warner would squeak by only a point, even though all the previous polls didn't show that. So they, at least, the model they had for measuring exit polls must have been different than the model they had for taking polls. But in other places, the closest we got to an accurate exit poll was in Georgia, where the exit polls predicted Michelle Nunn would be 1 point behind, and she lost by 8. That's the closest we got. In Kentucky, in Arkansas, in West Virginia, they were, in Nikki Rahal's race, they were 10, 11, 12, 13, in one case 14 points off, because there was a collapse of the youth vote. The African-American vote held fairly steady and was remarkable given that we had a little bit of a loss of the Hispanic vote, perhaps because the president didn't issue the immigration order, but it was a tough call for him, because had he done so, then a lot of the others would have lost by even more. It was a difficult call. And so what that shows you is that the people who were against us felt more strongly than the people who were for us, and the people who were for us, just in all the din, couldn't hear what was actually a fairly coherent economic message coming out, because when you ask them what they wanted, they say, we wish the Democrats had talked about student loan reform or equal pay or creating jobs through infrastructure projects. And almost 100% of the Democrats that I campaigned with talked about all that, but we didn't have, again, a national advertising campaign that might have made all the difference in a couple of close races, but it would not have changed the larger outcome. I also believed that one of the things that we need to get smart about is how you start your campaign is important, but sometimes the people who would be most influenced by what you say at the beginning don't listen till nearer the end. I'll give you an example. You guys always say, oh gosh, we want all these people to work together and cooperate, and why can't they do things? You know, the poster boy for bipartisan cooperation in the U.S. Senate, except for Mark Pryor, who lost here, but no, they didn't care here. It was a different deal. But it was in Colorado, Senator Udall co-sponsored with Republicans, the bill that created the Simpson-Bowles Budget Commission, the bill that ended earmarks, the bill that gave the president a line-item veto authority again. He was co-sponsored legislation to support a balanced budget amendment, and he co-sponsored the immigration reform bill. And it was all, and he did advertise it in the beginning. And then he was criticized for talking about women's rights. And his opponent, who was rated the 10th most conservative member of the House, was dubbed a moderate because he said he no longer supported the personhood amendment. And yes, he was still on the personhood bill as a sponsor in the House, but everybody knew you had to amend the Constitution, so it didn't really have any, you all shouldn't worry about my name on that bill. And besides, he thought it was okay for women to buy contraceptives. And last time I checked, that's been legal for 40 years. And so their threshold for what constituted a moderate was pretty low. And so here's the guy who did it. And I think the people who really cared about that were the undecided voters at the end. And it might have worked better if whatever he said in the beginning, I never saw the ads or anything, would have been run heavy at the end. There are a lot of things that we need to know that we don't about the difference between people who decide in the last week and people who got their mind made up early. And Colorado's the easiest place in the country to vote. You know, everybody just mails in, or you can bring in your mail-in ballot to the place. And so it wasn't a turnout issue, or there were no voter suppression efforts or any of that. It's just, but I had the feeling all along that he was doing a little better than he was doing. And I think part of what happened is the profile got lost in whatever the news du jour was. And I feel badly because I think he was an exceptional public servant, and so I didn't want him to lose. But anyway, we got to learn about that. And I think the Republicans are also doing that too, because I know enough of them. I've talked to several of them, and a lot of them were surprised by their victory margins. A lot of them won by 4, 5, 6, 8 points more than they thought they did. Some of them who put their own money into the campaign in the last week, once they saw how much they won by, I probably wish they had the money back. But, you know, measuring the psychic landscape of America has always been a challenge, and it will continue to be, and that's probably a good thing.